Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 50. Make sure you like and follow wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. The Rams are Super Bowl champions. Cooper Kupp is your Super Bowl MVP, but the Bengals covered the 4.5 points. So much to discuss about the game, obviously, and so much to discuss about the props and the wins and Odell and anytime touchdowns and all that other fun stuff. But first, be a pro and win with DRF Sports Pro. Introducing DRF Sports all-new premium data feature on drf.com/sports. For $99 a year, which is just $8.25 a month, you can get industry-leading betting trends, angles, and analytics. With the playoffs here, it's a best way for you to make some money this postseason and have fun while doing it. And you'll continue to do it during the college basketball season as well. So remember, DRF Sports Pro. Sign up now at drf.com/sports. And hopefully we keep up our pro picks here as well on the pod. As just a heads up, letting you know we'll be taking a bit of a break here on this main feed, but don't worry, still got you covered with the DRF College Sports Podcast. Those guys will have you covered for sure with everything that you need in terms of deep diving into college basketball and the lines and betting angles and all that other fun stuff. But as mentioned, today's show, Super Bowl recap. I was on the Rams, who did not cover, but we'll get into that, and I'll let you know how everything played out as our guy, Matt Russell, joins us once again to break it all down. And luckily for us, that starts right about now. So the Rams win 23-20. Cooper Kupp is the MVP. The Bengals cover the 4.5 point spread, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't money made on the Super Bowl. And here to discuss it all is my dude, Mr. Matt Russell. One last time to wrap up this season on the DRF Sports Podcast. But my dude, how are you feeling the morning after the Super Bowl?
I'm at that age where it's less about the casual beverages and more about the food consumption as far as like how rough you feel the next day. But, you know, we survive. Weird game. Listen, football is a weird sport. You know, it's an oblong ball. They give out 7 points every time you score have a primary score. Things are going to happen that are a little bit weird. I thought, sort of a sneaky, poorly coached game in the non-obvious ways. A lot of times we deal in the obvious.
I don't know if it was that sneaky.
Well, normally we come in, we're like timeouts, challenges, fourth downs, these clowns, like, what are they doing? But, there wasn't any challenge, buffoonery or timeout nonsense. And they actually were going for it on fourth down yesterday. So really weird game. We'll talk about that, obviously, in the form of, we like to be transparent. I like to be transparent when I come on this show. I'll put it this way. I had thousands of dollars in play for that game yesterday.
Okay.
I finished up $18. It was like the break-eveniest of Super Bowls for me. Because, listen, we talked about having the Rams money line, not wanting anything to do with the point spread. At least I certainly didn't want anything to point spread. You've obviously committed to having to make a play on the point spread. We talked the under. Right, and the under was a key element there. And of course, it's the Super Bowl, which means obviously you don't have to do anything. But I'm in on the first half money line, the first half -3, that ended up pushing, and the first half under, which was maybe the sweat of the entire game. The first half under was a wild one. And we had talked about the props to support that thesis of what you think the game is going to look like. And I don't do the like, hey, pick the score type of a thing. But in my head, I was like, I kind of think this is going to be 30-17 for the Rams, right? So Rams comfortable while hitting the under. And I build a props menu, a portfolio, if you will, to support that thesis. And so that if you're right about the game beyond just getting the winner right or the total right, that you can cash big, right? A lot of those props are going to fall into line. And if you're wrong, it won't take, it'll take a lot to kind of really submarine you, right? You're still going to win some props almost by accident. Well, like I got absolutely trucked by and large in the prop game. I had a couple that, we had some plus money props that hit, the Beckham Jr. touchdowns, like, that sort of thing. But like, for some reason, like I was, and we'll talk about like what we got right and what we got wrong. But like for some reason, the Rams money line and the under was still able to hit, even though the path to that didn't look the way we thought it was going to look, which, again, weird football, right?
Yeah, super weird game. And, the transparency, again, I'm right there with you. And that's one of the things I love about what we do on this podcast. And I'll tiptoe around how I say this, but there's a lot of stuff out there in which people will put out not even picks. They're just putting out content. And I don't really understand why I would tune into said content when you're not giving out picks. And then even if you do, you're not accountable for those picks. So that's one of the things that I'm always going to be about. And so hey, you said it. I've committed to making picks against the spread for the whole season. And yes, I was heavy on the Rams -4.5. I bet heavy on the Rams -4.5. Okay. And then in-game bet the Rams money line when they were down. And it was funny because the guys I was out with, they were all like, oh, really? Like I'm thinking the number should be way better. They thought the number, I think I got it at because it was late in the game, right? I should have done it earlier, but it was later and it was like +115 or something like that. The Rams money line, right? That number could have been way better. And they were like, shouldn't it be way better? I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, there's a reason why that's the number, because they're going to come back and win. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a side to it where you're looking at the number and it's like, that's why the number's that low. Like but whatever.
It never got out of hand. On the money line, right? Like even when it was down 7, I think the most it was like maybe +150, because when they were down 7,
that's the most I saw it at.
Yeah. When they were down 7, it was like, okay, they do need 2 scores to win this game, right? And they kick that field goal, and then it's obviously down to 1 score. And at that point, it's kind of a 50-50, proposition at that point.
Yeah. So that was a thing there. To make the money back was the Rams money line, came back over the top on the Rams money line. Yeah. But as you mentioned, was heavy on the Odell anytime touchdown. That first touchdown, I can't lie, the bar like kind of erupted and we were up like, everyone's like high-fiving because they're like, yep, Odell. And then Cooper Kupp MVP, which we'll get into that later on. But I'm just saying in terms of transparency right off the top, because I think that adds context into how we're going to talk about this game, letting you know where the money fell. So I basically broke even as well, right? Like made the money back. But I was sitting there sweating it out. I'm like, please Cooper Kupp be MVP. Please Cooper Kupp.
That MVP. Was a game changer. Yeah.
That was a big one. But let me start here, right? Because the lessons for me have been big this season on this podcast, right? And to me, this game was a big lesson in terms of what side was the right side. And I wanted to get the money and where things fell. I wanted to get that out early so that people understand that, because to me, the side is so much important in terms of when you're deciding, did I do a good job or did I do a bad job? And I think the Rams were the right side. If you look at this game, Odell goes down, that changed their offense completely, right? Two, and even without that, it was basically 2 massive plays involving Jalen Ramsey, and that's the cover, right? If not for those 2 massive, huge plays, that's an easy cover for the Rams in this game. So what did you think about that in terms of were the Rams the right side? I'll start there.
Yeah, it's funny. So, I mean, it's hard to argue they were the right side from like a spread standpoint, because, once basically the first play of the second half hits, you go, okay, like the Bengals are going to cover this game, even if they don't win. That being said, I look at it like, it's the Super Bowl, so it's one game. So we get to sort of beat, this game sort of to a pulp. I go, okay, what are we right about and what are we wrong about? And so when you talk about the Rams offense, like we were wrong about the Rams offense being able to run the football. And that was the root of the handicap, right? Is that they're going to be able, and it wasn't like, oh, Cam Akers stinks, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, right? But the matchup was supposed to be a lot better for the Rams from a running game standpoint than it was against San Francisco or Tampa Bay. And they're not able to do anything. And so then you go into the passing game, and it's funny how, like, you know, it's not
Hold
like
on.
everybody
Before you get to the passing game, can I ask you a question? How many times can you run it into the line on first down, though?
And that's
right?
what we're talking about
like
when
Sean
it comes
McVay,
to
like
yeah.
Come on,
and you know, and I've written about Sean McVay and sort of the idea that, like, I want Sean McVay coaching my team right up until the game starts, or sort of, you know, like if you know, he's almost the Jimmy Garoppolo of coaches, where you don't want him to have to think on his feet when he's out there on the field, right? Where it's like, okay, let's put the game plan together. Let's put the offense together. Let's call some plays. And then he just starts doing that, where it's like, run it over and over and over again. Unfortunately, they won the game. And so now it's a positive reinforcement going forward, where, like, Sean McVay is just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. That's assuming he even comes back to coach the Rams next season, which seems like something that might not necessarily be all that much of a lock. So, you know, we're wrong about them able to run the football. And so that sort of affects the prop game, right? Where it's like, okay, any Akers props, that those go down the chute. All of a sudden, like, Henderson's back and he's getting all sorts of run, and Sony Michel, who's sitting there with like a bunch of 100-yard games at the end of the regular season, is sitting there like, man, I can't even get like more than like 3 snaps. Like, this is brutal. But you look at it and you go, okay, well, you know, it sort of went under the radar a little bit, where Tyler Higbee's unable to play. And, you know, 60 catches, he's not Gronk, he's not Kelsey, he's not like in that upper echelon of tight ends, but he's a weapon. If you watch any of the playoffs so far, right, you know that Tyler Higbee's a weapon. And you go, okay, like, from a prop standpoint, because we get in this mindset of being like, okay, well, what does that mean from a prop standpoint? And it's like, okay, next man up. And like, you end up betting like on some like random tight end guy that you've never heard before. And like Bryson Hopkins is like prominently involved in the second half of that football game. You're like, how did we get here? And then, like you mentioned, right, the offense is going smoothly. The scripted plays that we talked about are working well. They get 2 touchdowns. Obviously, the botched extra point makes, you know, 13-3. And then Beckham goes out with the injury. And now you're looking around and you're going, okay, we got like Bryson Hopkins is in our lives. Ben Skoranek is on the field. Like, he's part of the 3 wide receiver sets, and Van Jefferson is number 2. And I'm going to give Van Jefferson like a little bit of leeway here, because he literally became a father, but like in the middle of that game yesterday. So maybe his mind was elsewhere and he's trying to play in the Super Bowl. But anybody who's seen Van Jefferson knows that he's just another guy out there, right? He's the son of a former NFL player, went to Florida, all those sorts of things, but he is just another guy. And if he's your number 2, you're in some trouble.
I'll be honest with you. Until I saw the baby pics, I was coming on ready to roast that dude on this spot. I can't even lie to you. I would keep it a buck. Until I saw the baby pics, I was like, yo, man, can you at least try to make a play? And there was one shot of, I don't know if it was an assistant coach or who it was, like talking to him on the sideline after like one of the plays that he dropped, where Stafford gives him a chance, right? Stafford puts the ball up there and he just can't make a play. And it looked like, I don't know what the guy was saying, and maybe this is just my mentality of like wanting this to be the conversation, but it looked like the coach had his arm on his shoulder and he's kind of like, come on, man, can you like go up and make a play? Like, we need you. Like, that's what it looked like. He could have been telling him your wife's in labor, right? I don't know.
Right. I think it's somewhere in between, where he's like, man, I know your wife's in labor, but like, can you focus a little bit more? And I don't want to beat up him too much, but like, you look at it this way, you go, okay, now Jefferson's the guy who Stafford is throwing the ball deep to in single coverage. And let's just, keep it real here for a second. Yeah. Like, this is football 101. If you have one of your receivers one-on-one deep, you give him a chance to catch the ball, especially if it's against a safety, right? Like, that is a good matchup where you trust your guy to win the football. That is, not everything is 3 yards wide open. This is the NFL. That does not exist, right? This, they use the phrase college open versus pro open, right? Open, you have to throw the ball up to that guy. And so Stafford gets intercepted. And as we know, right, like that goes on his stat column as an interception. And so when we look back, it's like, we talk about winning and losing bets, right? You could be on the right side and 3 weeks later or 2 seconds later, it just is 0-1 on your stat sheet. Same thing for Stafford. It's 0-1. It is one interception on his stat sheet. And then Ben Skoranek is out there and he's unable to catch the ball and he tips it directly in the hand of Chidobe Awuzie. And he's sitting there like Awuzie didn't do anything other than just catch the ball when it landed in his lap. And so Stafford's sitting there going like, I have 2 interceptions. I didn't do anything wrong. And by and large, Matt Stafford didn't really do anything wrong in that game, which actually helped us out. And again, I want to have a conversation about the MVP, but that helped us out in that situation, which again, part of the handicap. But, just to sort of finish up here on the offense, now everybody, it's like, the Bengals know this, right? They're looking around, they're like, Skoranek, like Jefferson, Hopkins, like what are we like? Yeah, of course we're supposed to double and triple team Cooper Kupp, and it took kind of a heroic last drive there for Stafford to even get the ball to Cooper Kupp. My guy's out here throwing, and if you look at it, a no-look pass over the middle in through a window of 3 guys. That like if Patrick Mahomes did that, Patrick Mahomes would be carried on a throne by my house right now because like Santa Claus, he would somehow hit every city in North America overnight in order to celebrate that no-look pass. And Matthew Stafford does it, and it's like, okay, cool, but like it wasn't no-looky enough. Like it wasn't flashy enough. And like Cooper Kupp referenced it after the game. He's like, my guy's out here throwing a sweet no-look pass across the middle of the field because that's what it took to get Cooper Kupp open, right? You had to throw no-look passes to get Cooper Kupp open because the Bengals knew this was the only guy who was going to beat them, and he still managed to beat them. So I'm looking at that, and like once Beckham goes out, like it's amazing that the Rams were able to get to 23 points. And so if my handicap of the game sort of creates this universe, again, before we even get to the Bengals offense side of things, my handicap creates this universe where it's going to be 30-17. I have to go, okay, why didn't it get to 30 points? And to me, the answer is Beckham got hurt, right? Like we're talking about a situation
changed the whole offense.
Yeah, I mean, they had 13, 16 points, something like that, 13 points in the first half, and then obviously 3 points up until the point of the Cooper Kupp touchdown. It's like, changed the whole offense. They had plenty of great field position, a couple of back-to-back drives there that started basically at midfield that somehow they just weren't able to get a first down. And of course, any first down would have put them at least sort of in field goal range. And so you just go, okay, like I can't really beat myself up about them not getting to 30 really specifically in this situation because of what happened, right? And Beckham, it's not like Beckham wasn't all over the field, right? This wasn't a guy who we were just sort of hoping did something. It was like, no, man, my guy was doing work out there, right? Cashing touchdowns and whatnot. So incredible that they were able to get to 23, not going to beat myself up that they didn't get to 30 on that side of the ball.
Yeah, man. I mean, at that point, I was kind of worried at the start of the game. I'm like, is Beckham going to win MVP? And I know it's way too early to be thinking that, but as you said, he was running free. He was loose early in that game. And you're just kind of like, okay, like this
at the moment he got hurt, he was the MVP of the game.
Yeah. And the thing at that point where the Rams were moving the ball super easy, like where they had the ball and they were just making plays, they were getting like, positive yardage on first down. Like they were getting first downs. They were moving up and down the field with OBJ in the lineup. Meanwhile, the Bengals on the flip side, I felt like they were kind of plugging and slugging their way through again, if not for the big, massive plays of Jalen Ramsey. But either way, we're talking about being on the right side. So we can agree. And hey, others watching, I'm sure people who are on the Bengals side will be cheering and being like, yeah, of course, Bengals covered, blah, blah, blah. Cool. We get that. We understand. Just want to break that down.
So
sorry.
I just about I don't know if this is maybe where you're headed, but about the Bengals offense, right? And like, it's funny, listen, we're all watching the same game. We'll probably have the same notes, but it is funny that you and I do have this note because, from that side of things, you go, okay, well, if I think they're going to have 17 points, how did they get to 20? Right. So what we were right about the Bengals offense is, what did we say? The only way this is going to work for the Bengals is if they just spread it out and they play the quick passing game. And what happens on the first play of the game? 5 wide, let's get weird, and they go to Mixon because you have to keep running the football to a degree. But when you're the Rams, right, you keep running the football. And the other option is, well, man, we're actually torching them pretty decently through the pass game. But when Beckham goes out, That's why they have to run the football more, right? And like people are going to beat up Sean McVay for constantly running the football, but it's like, what are the other options, man? Like throwing the ball a bunch to Ben Skoranek and Bryson Hopkins. Like they were running out of options out there. The Bengals had all of the options and they still were only able to get to 20 points. And you mentioned those plays, and it's like, again, the handicap going in was what? Well, one, Burrow's going to be under pressure a ton. Sacked 7 times, despite the fact that early in the first half, and again, not secret, but like sneaky bad coaching. Why weren't the Bengals running that same offense in the second half as they were in the first half, where it was quick throws, get it out, dump it off, like let's keep things moving, right? Why was I don't have the stat in front of me, but like Burrow's drop back and his time in the pocket, like basically almost doubled in the second half because of just the plays that they were running, right? And the offensive line was never going to hold up through a game. Like, I'm not going to say, it's almost going to do the thing where it's like, me and you could block Aaron Donald for a play. Like, no, we couldn't. But like, we might be able to do it for one play, but we certainly wouldn't be able to do it for 60 plays, especially like once we get tired of taking Aaron Donald in our face the entire time, right? And so we'd be exhausted and we'd be giving up 7 sacks too. And so I look at it and I go, okay, well, how did they get their points? And one of the things was, okay, we're going to have Jalen Ramsey on Jamar Chase, and we're going to take Jamar Chase unders. And that comes so close to hitting. Obviously, he makes the catch on the last drive, basically their last good, solid play of the game. Jamar Chase goes over. But why does he go over? Well, he makes one of the all-time great Super Bowl catches that, of course, will be lost to history on that play on Jamar Chase. So it's like it takes a world-class catch from Chase and the protection up front, by the way, in order to sort of have, from a prop standpoint, have the overhit on long pass completion for Joe Burrow. And so like, I'd be willing to make that bet again, that maybe next time Jamar Chase isn't able to haul that in because it was an incredible catch. And you go, well, there was another one. There was another long pass, right? We talked about how it was going to be really difficult for the Bengals to have explosive plays. Well, the other one took a face mask of Jalen Ramsey just getting slung across the field. And it's funny because a lot of times, and listen, you in this case, you slow it down and you look at the face and you go, oh, he grabbed him by the face mask. And you go, okay, like that was a face mask or offensive pass interference. But like, this is one of those where it was more obvious live than it was on the replay, because the replay looked like it was sort of just a subtle pull of the face mask. Well, live, Jalen Ramsey's body goes flying 5 yards down the field, like sliding as though he's on, some sort of icy patch, going down a hill. And you're just going like, okay, like Jalen Ramsey's body is not going to just fling itself down the field in that way unless something happened. Like, you didn't even need to know what the specifics were in order to figure out that like there was some sort of interference happening in that, right? And so like, think about it this way. If that gets called, whether it's a 15-yard face mask or a 10-yard offensive pass interference, we're talking 1st and 20 for the Bengals on the next play. The Bengals offensive line on 1st and 20, and whatever ends up sort of happening after that, whether it's 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 8 or something like that, like, do you think that's going to hold up? So that's 7 points that could very well, if one call gets made, that's 7 points that become 0 points from a sort of, probability standpoint, right? Like, what's their point probability if they're 1st and 20 from their own 15-yard line? Based on what we saw the rest of the game from that offense, it's not high that they're going to score a touchdown, right? Because that was their one touchdown. And then the other touchdown was on a trick play where, Joe Mixon throws the football on 2nd and goal from the 6. And so if they don't run that trick play, if they don't have that play in the book, what from the Bengals red zone offense had we seen that would make us think that they were going to definitely convert a touchdown there, right? Like that could easily have been a field goal. So even if we give them the T. Higgins touchdown, but we turn the Joe Mixon pass to T. Higgins into a field goal, now all of a sudden, instead of 20 points, we're talking about 16 points, right? So I think the mean, or even just the median, or, just in general, like the most likely outcome for the Bengals offense in that game, even having watched it, was about 16 or 17 points. And like a lot of good stuff had to go their way for them to get to 20, right? And so again, Beckham injury turns 30 points into 23, and some frankly fluky, fortunate plays for the Bengals turns that from 20, from 17 into 20. And now all of a sudden you have that tightened up. And so, again, we're talking, from a handicapping standpoint, like what did we get wrong there? And the only thing we got wrong really was the Rams' inability to run on offense, because I think we nailed the Bengals offense versus Rams defense side of things right down to the point where, it was an absolute wrecking crew situation from the defensive line, the front seven for the Rams.
Yeah, and like Ramsey gets smoked on that play in the first half. Like Chase just like burned him deep, right? And it's like, okay, that'll happen. That's where you get the first few points on. The face mask is just, it's a one thing that I don't understand about replay, right? When it's like you replay literally everything, but when there's like an obvious call, and I'm not even saying that they should implement this because this is a whole other can of worms. But I'm just saying, like, if you have the ability to replay and there's something super obvious like that, like, shouldn't you be able to? Because it's super obvious, right? Like, especially once they run.
That's my thing. Like, what we don't even need replay. Like Jalen Ramsey's body. Like, if you're an official,
maybe he should have flopped more. Right? Maybe he should have flopped.
How could you? Like, it was like he flopped, right? Like, again, he was like horizontal, like skidding down the field, right? And if you're an official and you're like, that's your job. I mean, unfortunately, it's their part-time job, but like, if you're back there every week and like, inherently what pass interference looks like, what offensive pass, what these guys' bodies are supposed to look like in motion and like how it's supposed to look like. And you mentioned like Ramsey getting beat on the chase play. Like, if that doesn't get hauled in sort of a relatively miraculous way by Chase, we never think twice about it, right? And like, we do the thing where we go like, well, Ramsey is going to be on Chase, and like, that's going to lock him down. But it's like, it doesn't mean that Ramsey's going to win 100% of the time, right? It means that like, he's going to get beat on certain plays, but there needs to be pressure up front so that the ball never even gets that far. And two, like, Chase still has to make a catch. And in this case, which would have been an incredible catch. And by the way, they only got a field goal on that drive, right? The Rams bowed up, right? And were able to stop them for a field goal. So like, to me, that play didn't necessarily change the point scoring probabilities, right? If they don't get that, for example, right? I don't think it was on third down. If they don't get that, they're still in decent field position, right? Like, there's still a decent chance that they get a field goal, especially with Evan McPherson kicking. And so that's why it's different from the Higgins one, where it's like, if you make that call, which looks obvious because his body is getting flung, right, in a way that is just unnatural for him to be, like, he wouldn't do that on his own, I guess is the point, right? And so like, that's the big play, obviously, of the game. And obviously, listen, if the Bengals win that game, we're talking about that in a lot more severe type of a way when it comes to the officiating and all of that sort of thing, right? Like, fortunately, so when you say like the right side won, sort of once you erase that play, they just didn't win by necessarily enough for the point spread. But again, if that play doesn't happen, I kind of think they do, right? And even if that play does happen and Beckham's still healthy, I kind of think they still win and cover that game. But again, we'll never know, right?
We'll never know. Yeah. And I mean, that's a tough break for Odell, and remove I know people have a lot of feelings about Odell Beckham Jr., but however you feel about him, that has to suck, right? The way that all went down, that sucks. But there's something else I want to talk about here.
Yeah,
because another big deal coming into this game was about the halftime show. Lots of different things going on. I thought it was great, but also, like, obviously I'm extremely biased because I would assume that we are the target demo for said halftime show, right? Like, this is putting us in a moment in time of our youth, of good times, remembering, the parties we were at when these songs were bumping, the surprise 50 Cent Upside Down. Like, it just hit my soul, right?
Yeah.
There are also a lot of bets, and we talked about on our preview pod about what the first song would be. And that kind of became a thing.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't have it like much to drink yesterday, so it probably sounds like the drunken ramblings of somebody in a game. But okay, so this is what happened. I don't listen. I wrote a lot over the last couple of weeks, not necessarily about the halftime show. I did a Friday Twitter Spaces on Friday over at the Score, and I spent much of the afternoon, not much of, but like a good hour, right, going through actual tracks of everybody involved to try to figure out like who actually is like what song is actually going to play. Because I think we talked about the idea of like Lose Yourself being like a really good option because like you could picture, again, I was sort of thinking like it was going to be dark. It's funny how like you picture a Super Bowl like it's dark by 8:00, only it's 5:00 because it's LA and it's not even dark out, and so you have a whole other ability to sort of I thought the Los Angeles sort of floor type setup where it was like the grid of Los Angeles, I thought that was really cool. And so I'm going through it and I'm like, wait a minute here, there are a lot of Dre songs that would be sort of favored to start this show that literally start with Snoop singing, right? Like he is the first voice you hear on sort of, I think it was like literally 2 out of the 4, top Dre songs that you would sort of consider being the first song to be played. So I talked about this on the Twitter Space on Friday. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to bet Snoop to be the first performer, the first singer, right? First person to speak. And that was, listen, it wasn't some crazy bet. It was like plus 135. Right. And so there's a couple of things, a couple of elements as the weekend goes on. And so we get closer to the Super Bowl a couple hours before. I'm like, oh, let's check in on some of this halftime odds, see if there's stuff that's changed, because like the rehearsals get leaked, right? And information comes out. And we see that with the anthem, which was another winner for me. My colleague over at the Score, Alex Moretto, was very aggressive about giving that out on that Twitter Space. And so I have to give him credit, because you and I were talking about like the art and science of it all, right? And the art certainly won in that case, which wasn't all that surprising.
Oh, it did. She held on to that little.
And God bless her, because there was a moment where I thought it wasn't going to go over, because you go like, there's only 4 words left in the song. And there's 15 seconds to go to hit the over. But fortunately, those 4 words take 30 seconds. But I digress. So anyway, I look, and there's a couple hours beforehand, I see that Snoop is now the favorite. Not a massive favorite by any means, but he goes from plus 135 to like minus 110 to be the first person to sing. And I go, that's one of two things. One, people are on the same thing that I am as far as like actually listening to some of these songs, and like Snoop being the first one to talk. Or the sort of set list has been leaked, or somebody's seen a rehearsal and a couple of people know, and maybe they've put in some bets, but by and large, it was actually a pretty good secret, right? What the set list was going to sort of sound like. But I go, okay, I think I'm in good shape here when it comes to Snoop. So the halftime show starts, and sure enough, right, it's one of the songs that has Snoop singing first, and you hear Snoop's voice, but they don't show Snoop singing first, but you can clearly hear him. Like, we all have ears. Everybody knows like this song. We've been listening to this song for 20 years, as you mentioned. And so I'm like, yeah, cash it, man. Like, there's Snoop. Okay. Like, I hear Snoop. I see Dre follow up afterwards as the song goes. These aren't songs that they just made up yesterday. This is 20 years, as Dre had to change his lyric from 10 years in the rap game to 30 years in the rap game. And I'm like, okay, sick, cash it. Like, let's go. Right. And I'm like, high five. So I've won on the anthem. My other bet was there to be no bleep. There to be literally no censor bleep, right? And like you and I both know from working in television for a decade that they're never going to bleep anyone. All they're going to do is just go silent for 3 seconds, right? There is going to be a 3-second button that somebody hits, 3 or 5 seconds to sort of depending on sort of the rules and regulations. And they're never going to do that because this is a rehearsed thing. They're going to tell the performers, hey, if you swear, we have to dump the audio for 3 to 5 seconds. And that's going to really mess up your show. So your other option, so swear all you like, but we're going to dump the audio. Like, we're not stopping you from swearing, but we just know that the sound is going to be bad. So they have to change some of the words, right? And you can see some of the more obvious ones where they sort of tweak the word, the radio edit, if you will.
And without getting too deep, they did change Kendrick's lyrics to and we hate Popo, they took that out and he did not. Okay. Right. And it's like, that's a thing because that song is very real, I'll say. Has a lot of meaning without getting too in depth into it. But like, that's a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about. Because and I don't want to get too far into the Kaepernick and all that stuff, but I'm just saying to your point. It was
so I'm like, it was never going to be a bleep. That's not how it works, right? Bleeps happen after edits, audio dumps happen live. And so I'm like, okay, like that's going to win, but you never know because some of these operators out there are a little bit shady, no pun intended. And you sort of go, okay, like they're going to sort of, they're going to say this or that or whatever, right? They're going to make some sort of case. And so I go, okay, like this is great. And so the point to all of this is for whatever reason, I looked to, and I never do this, and I can't even really tell you positively why I did it. Maybe I saw a tweet. I think I saw a tweet of somebody saying like, how are they going to grade this? Because like Dre sang, like Snoop sang, but then like Dre was the one on camera to sing first. And I'm like, we all have ears, right? And like we have a recording of this song. It's not like they went off script of the song. Like that's how the song goes. I can play it on Spotify for you right now. And so I go, well, that's odd. Like, of course they're going to grade it for Snoop. And I look up in my, in my account. And it says lost. I lost the bet on Snoop. And I'm like, no, sorry. Like, and it's not even for like literally any money, right? Like it's just these tiny limit halftime stupid things, but it's the principle. It's the principle. It's the idea that like you screwed this up. How could you screw this up? Right? Like, come on. And so I get into and again, it's not even about them screwing it up so much as it is going into the customer service and then being like, no, sorry, not, it was graded correctly. And I'm like, no, like it just wasn't, like, it just was not graded correctly. And it's like, no, yes, it was. And I'm just like, the powerlessness you feel, because like, what am I supposed to do? Call the police that they graded this incorrectly, right? Like there's nothing I can do, right? Speaking of the Popo, like I'm not going to, the irony of me calling the police because a Dre Snoop prop bet didn't come through. Now they ended up correcting that later on, like a couple hours later after the game, like, oh, they changed it back. I don't know if they changed it or they just cashed both bets, right? They just allowed both to sort of count, but it's like,
which would be crazy.
And it happened, like, it would be crazy if they did both, but I think they might have because they certainly probably already cashed the Dre ones, right? And so, long story short, I go back and I'm just like, that's just so bad that you would just, brush someone off from a customer service standpoint and just say like, it was graded correctly. And it's just like, I'm not even really sure what I expected out of them necessarily, but it's just like, just do better, industry, right? Like this industry is so relatively new, and again, new jurisdictions coming basically every week or every month. And the one that we're living in, that has certainly been because of a gray market, black market type situation, we've had a gray market for 20 years. It's why a lot of the sort of best sports betting handicappers are Canadian, because we have had access to all of these websites for 20 years, whereas obviously in the United States, right, it's just been Las Vegas for the longest time, and like your bookie, right, like your local guy or whatever, right? And that's obviously a lot more prohibitive. And so we've been ahead of the game here, but we are finally going to have sort of legalized betting with all the companies that you sort of know and love down in the United States, and we're going to have that in April. And it's like, customer service and grading bets correctly is going to be relatively important in all of this. Huge. And so I just look at it and I'm just like, how do you just admit, or not even admit, but how do you claim that you did this correctly, where we have a 20-year-old song of evidence that says like Snoop starts that song, he was on stage, Maria Taylor's out there tapping him on the shoulder before halftime, and he's looking back like, what is this woman doing? How are we there? So I mean, I don't know, like, listen, people do. So I wanted to mention one thing that had nothing to do with betting as far as the halftime concerned, because I want to shout out Roger Sherman from the Ringer. He had a great tweet, except for he screwed up the years in all of this. But I want to read the tweet. He said, everybody born between 1985 and 1995. I would skew that decade. The years were wrong. It's not let's sort of, not get
important.
beat. Let's not beat him up for that. Not important. But he said, whatever. People of a certain age saw the Super Bowl halftime show lineup and were like, sweet. Instead of doing a show for old people like the Rolling Stones or Paul McCartney or the Who, they did one for us young people. And then 10 seconds later, it hit us. Because you look at these, my significant other, Emily, she's sitting there, she's going, Dre is 56 years old. Eminem's Mary J is, Snoop is 50. Oh no! Like, it's just, you're like,
Hey,
God.
Hold on. What? When did that moment hit you? Because for me, it hit me with 50. When 50 popped on the screen and he was upside down, and I was kind of like, that doesn't look like the same 50. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but like, again, like, guess what, man? 50's 46 years old, right? And it's like, yeah, if 25
you can't have the shirt off anymore.
Yeah, and then when I'm 50 or 46 years old, or now, like, it would be a lot different than when I was 25. And so, I'm not gonna beat anybody up over that. So, listen, I don't know if it was the best of all time. Like, we immediately, obviously, and I'm pretty sure we talked about this last Super Bowl, like, the tweets that come out on Super Bowl Sunday, both before, during, and after the game, are just like nothing else the rest of the year, whether it's betting Twitter or like people watching a game that don't normally watch football, or like entertainment / halftime show takes. It is wild out there as far as just insanely bad takes getting slung around. So listen, I don't know if it was the best of all time. All I know is, thing that people were really looking forward to, those people liked, right? Like, not a shock. Like, I liked it. You liked it. We knew we were going to like it. I could literally put the playlist on Spotify right now and have like the greatest breakfast I've ever had in my life for 20 minutes, right? Like, the setup was cool, like the house stuff. And I was like, who's coming out of this house? And like, what's going on there, right? I like, I'm pretty sure, and I don't know this for a fact, we'll get research on it, but I'm pretty sure Kendrick was literally rapping on the map of Compton. I'm not totally sure about this.
I gotta look that up. I'm not sure.
I want that to be the case, because that would be like next level stuff as far as like all of like the, the LA map, essentially. That would be phenomenal. I don't know if there was a prop out there.
I was going to say, though, I found the ages. So Dr. Dre is 56 years old. Mary J is 51 years old.
51.
Snoop is 50. Yeah. Snoop is 50. Eminem is 49, and 50 Cent is 46.
Yeah. Yeah. She literally read them to me, and she was like horrified. She's like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, like, people age, like, you see former football players, and it's like, guess what? They don't look the same as we remember them when they were in the 28 years old. They're 50 years old. Like, just because Mick Jagger has looked the exact same for the last 60 years due to probably aggressive amounts of work. When the quote unquote old guys are out there on the stage during some of these halftime shows, or the new, we get the Weeknd and Gaga, right? Like, we get them in their quote unquote prime. Like, this was a throwback. And unfortunately, we are now in the era where, like, they are throwing back for us, and it's horrifying, and it makes me a little bit sad.
And you're correct. Compton, literally Kendrick on Compton. Yes, that is correct.
Oh yeah. Still got it, folks.
It was actually again, like, I don't want to dwell on this, because obviously, it's hitting our souls. It was perfect for us and our generation. And I was hyped that, again, Mary should not be performing No More Pain at the Super Bowl. Like, that is not a thing that should happen. But at the same time, I respected it. No, I respected it, because I was just like, this was clearly a fight at some point, because I remember it came out that Mary was going to get just one song, and we knew that was going to be the hateration, holleration in this dancery. We knew it was going to be Family Affair. And I was like, oh, really? They're just going to give Mary one song and she's out? And I was like, I guess I kind of get it. So when she got the second song, I was just kind of hyped. That, like, hey, they let Mary cook a little here, right? They let Mary cook. Go get it, Mary, So I was happy to see that. But yeah, halftime show was dope. We liked it. The betting angle of it was hilarious. Someone in the group I was out with had a bet on Snoop's shoes. So we spent like the first 2 minutes being like, wait, are those gold? Because he needed them to be gold or yellow. And I'm like, I think that's more white. we spent a lot of time analyzing that. So that was funny. But as you mentioned, there's only one day like the Super Bowl. It's incredible, right? When you look at it from all those angles. At the end, I want to ask you this question, right? So we get to the second half. We talked already about the start of the second half, what happened with the Bengals there. And, that game flipped. And at that point, a lot of people, including the people I was with, they thought the Bengals are going to win. I was just getting ready to bet on the Rams because I thought, somehow, some way, I don't know why. I was just like, nah, I still think the Rams can win this game for some reason. I don't know.
It's a primary live betting technique where you need to evaluate how, for example, the Bengals got their points. And as we just mentioned, right, it was kind of relatively fortunate. And listen, I had Bengals under team total 22.5. And so I'm sitting there, it's 20 points, very early on in the second half. And I was like, well, this is done for. And it somehow cashes, right? And so again, I'm piecing together with the props going sort of as relatively poorly as they were. I'm sitting there because again, my game script was Matthew Stafford isn't going to have to throw 40 times. He did. And my game script was that Joe Burrow is going to have to throw 40 times. And he didn't. I mean, he probably should have, but he wasn't, allowed to in a lot of cases. And so I'm sitting there just clinging to any bet that I can possibly win there, right? Just to get to my, plus $18 on the day. And so, I'm like, oh my God, the Bengals under actually somehow cashed. Cause I was kind of here for some overtime, something along those lines, right? I was kind of hoping that McPherson, speaking of, and this is an absolute, direction change here, but my best bet from a technical standpoint, right? And you and I talk about, how we evaluate bets, whether it's within the game or within the marketplace. My best bet for that entire game was Bengals to have the longest field goal, McPherson to kick the longest field goal, because that was available for a week plus at even money. And that's a line where you look at that and you go, and this, whether it's something as sort of silly as longest field goal or whether it's straight up the money line in a game, if you look at any market for a game and it opens even money and you think it should be favored, like we thought that it should be, with McPherson obviously having the bigger leg and, Bengals being maybe more likely to kick some field goals because they had 16 over the course of the previous 3 games. I think that's a little bit high, but still. And then it closes by Sunday at there was as high as minus 170, but there was some minus 130, 135s out there. So we'll say sort of minus 150 was the average close. If you're betting something at even money and it closes at minus 150, I don't care if it's the money line of the Super Bowl or week 3 of the NFL or a Tuesday night in February in the NBA or a field goal bet. That's an incredibly good bet, right? That moved, speaking of 50 Cent, that moved Curtis Jackson from plus 100 to an average of minus 150. That's a great bet. And he kicks 2 field goals early on. Unfortunately, they are of the 30 plus yard variety. And then Matt Gay, who again, the handicap was, he's not kicking any long 47 plus yard field goals. He doesn't, but he was able to kick 1 field goal for 41 yards. And the Rams side of things wins that bet. And so you just sit back and you go, that's an incredibly good bet. And it's one that didn't win. And that's going to happen. Luckily, I also had the 47.5 under, field goal length 2 to sort of counteract that, which again, shows how we basically split even on this entire game. But that's an incredible bet that goes by the wayside. And so when you're talking about your live, just to circle it back, is if we're looking at this and we're going, okay, those 2 touchdowns were a trick play and a play that probably shouldn't have counted. It makes a ton of sense that the Bengals, listen, now we start seeing Burrow get sacked and you can see, okay, the offensive line is starting to wilt here. Yeah. Live Rams. I thought about it too, man. I didn't pull the trigger because I had sort of enough going on that I was like, okay, let's kind of just keep it going here, Rams. Again, that's kind of a 101, right? If the points, whether it's basketball, an incredibly hot shooting start, or football with some relatively fluky points, you have to sort of factor that in when you're talking live betting. So you did a great job on that.
Yeah. I mean, the live bet was, I don't know. It's exactly what you're saying, right? Just trying to read the game and seeing that somehow, some way, they were able to move the ball. And I mean, I say somehow, some way, and it was just Cooper Kupp, who was an absolute beast. And you mentioned, I got to give credit to Matt Stafford too, because he's much maligned for sure. And I think other than maybe like very few people led by Dan Orlovsky in terms of like mainstream media actually like gassing my guy up, and they have a personal relationship, obviously, but he gets a bit of a bad rap. And I thought he played a pretty solid game. And when everybody knows you're throwing the Cooper Kupp and it was just them cooking, like that was incredible. And there are a few plays on that drive, like when he converts that 4th down.
Yeah,
I didn't like that play call. I'll be very honest.
Oh,
and like
okay.
The play call, no, going for it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Of course you have to. Yeah.
But the actual play call, I was like,
right.
Whoa, I don't know. Like I saw the play developing. I'm like, I don't know about that play. But at the end of the day, you're giving it to your best player and having him make a play. Right. Yeah. And maybe I'm going through the lens of, well, if I was okay with Debo doing that, got to be okay with Cooper Kupp doing that. You know what I'm saying? And it's just their best player making a play. But once that happened, I'm like, Kupp has to win MVP. Like he just like, you're just on a mission at that point.
Yeah.
But then you flip and you see what Aaron Donald was doing on the other side. And it was like, to use a reference, it was hold up. Hey,
that's right.
Right. Is Aaron Donald the MVP? Like, what did you think about
Forgot
that?
about Donald. Yeah.
Right. What did you think about that down the stretch? Because to me, it was like Kupp getting the touchdown, the plays that he had to make on that drive. Absolutely incredible. The game-winning touchdown. Yes. To me, Cooper Kupp is the MVP. But I'll hear people on their Aaron Donald arguments for sure. Like I wouldn't have argued that if Aaron Donald was named MVP.
The most valuable player on the field in Super Bowl 56 was Aaron Donald.
Okay.
He just was. He just was. 2 sacks on the score sheet in the game sealing play to get Joe Burrow on 4th down. And like, listen, if Joe Burrow, he flings the ball because Joe Burrow's a smart quarterback and he knows there's he basically did the Jimmy Garoppolo throw, only it wasn't intercepted at the end of the game, right? Like that's the only difference. And again, it doesn't go as a 1 on the interception side for Joe Burrow. It just goes falling incomplete, right? And that's the sort of fraudulence of stats and football. Mm-hmm. And Aaron Donald was a victim of that fraudulence, because if he gets that sack and it's a 3-sack night for Aaron Donald, if Joe Burrow drops the football and he gets a sack and a forced fumble, if Joe Burrow drops the football and Aaron Donald recovers it and he gets a sack, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery, right? Like now we're like we're getting the stats here, but those, it went from 0 stats because it was just an incomplete pass to could have been a sack, fumble, and fumble recovery, right? He could have had 3 more things on his stat sheet, and the play would have resulted in the same thing. It would have resulted in the game being over. But that's the problem. And that's why we bet Cooper Kupp and not Aaron Donald at plus 900. That's why fundamentally we avoided Aaron Donald, because of the bar that gets set for defensive players. And that, I'm willing to sort of sprinkle around to see if like maybe some guy gets an interception or a fumble recovery that we don't think that, that much about in 100 to 1, 200 to 1, 300 to 1 type of way, because I can put a couple of bucks on Eric Weddle at 300 to 1, that if he runs into an interception and takes one to the house, I've won $600 off of a $2 bet. Well, I'm not going to make a $2 bet on Aaron Donald. I'm not going to make a $50, $100 bet on Aaron Donald, because I know before the game, as part, and this is the most important thing, part of the handicap is that a 2-sack game sealing play for Aaron Donald is not likely to be enough in voters' minds, even though you and I all of us know that he was the most important player in that game, because we know the league, we know the narrative. We talked about the idea that like Cooper Kupp was considered obviously an MVP candidate in the regular season, and if we had to do that vote again, he might actually win it, knowing what we know now. And then that was going to be the point, right? The voters were going to make good essentially if they were able to. And he gets 2 touchdowns and he gets the 4th down conversion, he gets the game-winning touchdown, and that game-winning touchdown would have been even more significant from a voting standpoint if it was the first game-winning touchdown that he caught, where he got absolutely blown up in the back of the end zone and Shout out to the medical, the spotters and whatnot for completely ignoring the fact that he was lying on the ground after getting taken that shot. Like apparently concussions don't count in the Super Bowl. Calories don't count in the Super Bowl. Offensive PI doesn't count in the Super Bowl, and concussion stuff doesn't count in the Super Bowl.
Defensive PI didn't count in the Super Bowl either until the very end, right?
Until the very end. But again, speaking of handicaps, right? Like we talked about under 10.5 penalties because the referees were going to quote unquote stay out of the game. So like it's the same neighborhood, right? Of like, you could call a penalty on every play. You could call holding on every play. We have seen false starts happen through the entire playoffs that weren't called. And so when there's a false start on that play where the sort of dicier of the two hold, I mean, people are called like the offense, or not the offense, but the pass interference penalty. Like that was pass interference. Like he's grabbing the jersey, two different guys through the flag. Like you can't call that dubious. Like, you know, it's like, again, one sort of sketchy call then turns into the next call being somehow sketchy too, even though those were two completely different plays. You know, the hold, you know, is that a hold? Like, yeah, maybe, you know, I don't know. Right. And so again, point is Aaron Donald was the best player on the field. He was the most valuable player on the field. He is the game changer of that entire, he allowed the Rams to be able to pull off that last drive. But once that last drive was basically entirely Cooper Kupp, right down to the point of a 4th down conversion on a rush and the final touchdown, like, it was weird because I needed Cooper Kupp as you know, like plus 600 to just get past the break even mark on the Super Bowl. I'm sitting there needing that. And I go like, I kind of would have I kind of would vote on Aaron Donald here. So I was like, my mind thinks Cooper Kupp's going to win the MVP because I know how voters work. I would vote for Aaron Donald and I need Cooper Kupp. And so it was like this really weird space where it's like, I'm not even sure how mad I'm going to be if they give it to Aaron Donald, right? Like, am I going to be like, this is an outrage? Like, is this the, was it Damian Williams in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, with the Chiefs over the 49ers where like Patrick Mahomes got MVP, but like Damian Williams like did a lot of the work, right? And it was like, man, if you bet on Damian Williams that year, you would have a massive beef about who the MVP was. I'm like, I'm not even sure I'm going to have a massive beef, but like when that happens, you go, that's why you can't make a decent sized bet on Aaron Donald at 9-1 because it takes so much. And the guy almost got over that bar and frankly, probably should have gotten over that high bar that is winning an MVP as a defensive player.
Yeah, one of the dudes had Aaron Donald for MVP, and I was like, and we were talking about it right as they were about to announce it. And my thing was, one of those needed to be a strip sack. Like you needed the bigger play, strip sack, TD at the end or something like that. That would have been the signature moment because, this sounds like shade, and I don't mean it to be shade, but you're going to have the people who are voting that are just going to look down at the stat sheet. Right. And as you said, they're just going to see 2 sacks, blah, 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 blah. But when you watch the game and you like take in the game, and I know it's a Super Bowl, so there's parties going on, they're at a bar, people are talking, whatever. But even when you just look at the fact of the sack number, for example, which opened at like 3.5 or something like that, and then ended up going to 5, maybe. I don't even know if it got to 5.5. 5.5.
It was 5.5
and
plus
like,
105. Yeah. On the over. Yeah.
And the Rams alone were just like cooking that. And that's Aaron Donald getting pressure because even when Von Miller gets the sack, Aaron Donald is blowing up 2 guys.
I don't even know why I'm here. I should leave right now because you're literally just ripping through my points, man. You're killing this. Yeah, like that's it. It's almost like it was bad for him that they had so many sacks because it's like, oh, he had 2 sacks out of 7. And it's like, I guess that's okay. But it's like, he created the other sacks by getting double teamed. And when they didn't double team him, and for whatever reason, again, we talk about the subtlety of bad coaching and bad sort of play calling in this game. Samaje Perine on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1.5.
That was a massive play as well. That's a huge play as well by Donald.
A huge play by Donald, but like Samaje Perine, like Joe Mixon's probably getting that first down. He's at least going to sort of reach out at the end there and get that extra half yard. And you go like, Zach Taylor, you're really running. Samaje Perine hasn't had a carry in the previous 2 games and you're giving it to them. And Shell, he's done this before. And this is going to be really deep into the weeds here, but there was a game last year against the Colts where the same thing happened on 3rd and short and they gave it to Perine. He didn't get it. And in that game, instead of going forward on 4th and 1, Taylor kicked it. And at that moment, I was like, well, this Taylor guy is an absolute stooge. And like, I'm out on him for life, basically. And that's like as little as it takes for me when I'm watching a football game to sort of be just mega out on somebody. But the point is like, oh my God, it happened again. They gave it to Pirine. And of course, this time they obviously had to go for it. Like, it's not like it was some rocket science decision to go for it. But then they go and they pass play, but they leave one guy on Donald. And I think they wanted the center to come over and help, but Donald knew that. And he went the outside way, right? He went to the side, to the right side, or, his right side of the guard. And obviously just blew by the guard and whatnot. And so, like, again, it's funny. It's like, it would have been the same result if he strip sacks him, if he's, fumble recovery, all of that sort of thing. But it would have probably sealed the deal. But Burrow gets the ball. It's weird to say, but Burrow getting the ball out of his hands, even in sort of failure, gives Cooper Kupp a better chance of winning MVP in that game. So the thin line, man, razor's edge.
What a game. What just, everything going down from the betting to, the wild ride of learning how to just manage your budget, we'll say, for the Super Bowl and how to, lose the spread bet, but make the money back in other ways. Like, it was just an incredible ride, and summing up exactly what this season has been doing this pod for me, and just learning so much and figuring different things out and understanding the numbers, understanding the props, and just having a better strategy. And it's been a lot of fun doing this. And it was a great way to cap off the season because, at the end of the day, it was a great ride, man. And we won a lot of money on this pod. It was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And I think about this a lot, right? And it's like, the people that listen, cool, more power to you. The people that don't, hey, more power to you as well, because that's what the money's
best
for,
of luck.
Right? Best of luck to you, because that's what the money's for. It's been so much fun, honestly, such a good time. And like Cooper Kupp, like we were joking around about it, but like that's still like a very like good bet. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like to say that, because the obvious is always going to be the quarterbacks, and to be like, no, we're on Cooper Kupp. That's the bet. And that hits. It's just like, those are just the little things that I hope there's a lot of people who listen to this pod and feel the way that I do. Cause I try to represent the people here, in terms of learning and figuring things out along the way. So it's been a great ride, my dude. It's been a great ride, just to sum it all up, I guess.
Yeah. And it's funny, right? Because like betting is so hard, and the betting space is so hard. And this idea of like tailing people because like they make a bet and you go like, okay, I'm going to bet that too. And that's why having this podcast and sort of finding good quality podcast content out there, because we give more bets out than any podcast out there. I will just like flat out say that I will put that up against any podcast whatsoever. But we also talk about this stuff so that even if you don't see a tweet from me or you saying like, now is the time to live bet the Rams, if you're actually sitting and listening and paying attention, and like I would also say reading my stuff, like you would know, or sort of think to yourself, okay, like, well, they think the Rams are going to get pressure on Burrow. Hasn't happened much in the first half. Okay, it's starting to happen here in the second half. Like these different things that should trigger it. And like the offensive side for the Rams looked really sketchy, right? Because they didn't have any weapons left and any ability. But like, it's not about telling you who to bet. It's about having a conversation about sports through a betting lens so that like it becomes second nature, or at the very least third nature, so that like you kind of know what to look for, whether it's an in-game bet or even just any game, kind of going forward here. Right. And so like, that's the fun part about talking about these games and these sports for an hour, a couple of times a week, because it is, we'll give out a lot of bets, but we're also going to do our best to explain why those bets exist and why they may or may not cash. And like, like you said, man, like you're putting into place a plan, and maybe there's a different world where if you and I never meet, or we never do this podcast, maybe you're deep into the weeds on the Bengals and you're like money lining the Bengals and you're like getting really stubborn about that. And like, maybe that Super Bowl goes a little bit differently for you. And I don't even just mean you specifically, but I mean sort of the listener as well. Right. And like the idea that like, We talked about how betting in the Super Bowl works, where people back the underdog on the money line. Like, it was best case scenario for the sports book yesterday, right?
Oh, yeah.
Rams win, but don't cover. And so, like, the people who took the +4.5s probably also took the money line as well. And so they didn't win all that much, right? And the people who bet the Rams were taking the -4, the -4.5. So they certainly didn't win because they were scared off by the -200 price tag on the Rams on the money line. And so, like, that's the type of stuff that, like, that's what we do here, right? Like, that's the explanation element to all of this, and why sometimes these podcasts take so long for us, because we want to get deep into the weeds on some of this stuff and be able to break this down while having a pretty good time. So season finale, I mean, what a ride. Honestly, it was my best NFL season, like, without sort of getting into the numbers of it all, an outrageously awesome NFL season. But it's honestly, like, people go like, how do you get quote unquote good at betting? Not even implying that I'm even all that good. I'm just saying, like, when people ask me that, it's like, you get what you put into it, right? If you just kind of show up, watch a few games, and then think you know everything there is to know, like, there's so much. This is a lifelong learning thing, is sports betting, right? But the more you learn and the more, you know, research you're willing to do about how betting works versus about how sports work, because those two things are not the same, the better your results are going to be. And luckily for me, it's my job to do that. Right. And so I automatically, like, I have more time to sort of be able to dig into this stuff, and I am done it long enough, and I have more experience where I'm able to know, like, what's the important stuff and what isn't. So I can be a little bit more efficient than somebody who's 24 years old, right? Who maybe wasn't that excited about the halftime show yesterday from nostalgia purposes. And so that's our advantage, right? We might be the old heads out here, like, bumping our heads to Dre and Snoop, you know, and, like, for me, I was like, yeah, Kendrick was decent. Like, I'm not a massive hip hop, like, modern hip hop guy, but, like, when it was going for me, like, the Dre was in the club, right? Like, the we're in the club. So like, I think that's our advantage. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a long time, and we have a lot of fun doing this show. So hopefully I'll be back on soon enough here in the very near future. We got some March Madness in the future, obviously, and some playoff action down the pipe. And then next season, you know, again, it's media, you never really know, but hopefully we get to do this for season 2 and season 3 and season 762 down the line when we become invincible.
For sure. So, I mean, as mentioned earlier in the pod, there'll be a couple weeks where you won't see us, but in the meantime, of course, just stick to the feed. You know that there's a DRF Sports College pod. So check that out in the meantime, and we'll be back soon to discuss some more sports, gambling,
betting, wagers, props, March Madness, some fun stuff coming up. It doesn't stop at all. But in the meantime, my dude, where can the people find you on the socials? Yeah, man, at MRuss Authentic on Twitter. It's the only one. I don't mess in the Instagram game. That's just, you know, a path I don't really want to go down. I do not have a TikTok. It is just at MRuss Authentic, MRUSS Authentic on Twitter. Absolutely lit it up on Saturday. 18-7-1 in 26 bets in college basketball on Saturday. That's my focus for those next few weeks until we chat again. And then it's March Madness. And if you want to know how to fill out a bracket in sort of the most efficient way to allow you to win a contest, you're certainly not guaranteed to win the contest, but we'll talk about being really efficient in giving yourself the best chance to win that contest. Obviously, that's going to be super fun. Ton of bets, round robin, money line parlays in college basketball are coming back over at The Score. So everything I do over at The Score gets retweeted through at MRuss Authentic on Twitter. So listen, man, been a hell of a year. Love it.
Thanks again for stopping by, and we'll catch up soon, my dude.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks to Matt for coming on the pod. And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Don't forget to like and subscribe to DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also rate us, review us, like us, all that other fun stuff. But for more from this new project from DRF Sports, just a little reminder. If you're unfamiliar with the letters DRF, it stands for Daily Racing Forum, which has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we've taken over the entire sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, college sports, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all of the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, team stats, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, drf.com/sports. That's where you can find the usual previews as we deep dive into the games. And of course, we got you covered on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. Again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. We do this podcast twice a week on Tuesdays and on Fridays. That's all I got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.